The University of Michigan is 207 years old. The University of Michigan football program is in its 145th season, and Michigan Stadium is in its 97th season. 1,010 wins and counting, the most of any team, 45 Big Ten championships, and 12 national championships. Over the course of the last century and a half, Michigan football has largely been chronicled by programs distributed at home games, away games, and bowl games. Despite typically being just 8.5 inches by 11 inches, programs tell the story of our beloved university and beloved sport. Programs have gone through many evolutions over the last century and a half, which will be explained later, but they've always been a staple for fans entering the gates of Michigan Stadium, Rose Bowl Stadium, and everywhere in between. Collectors often leave a game carrying two precious items, a program and a ticket stub. These items, but particularly the program, are valued because they vary from game to game, providing a unique collectible for fans of all teams. Programs are pre-game reading material in the stands for some, and artwork to be displayed in a collection for others. First, I would like to explain my personal connection to the topic. I have always been a collector of Michigan memorabilia. Specifically, I purchase a program at every game I attend, when available, and I closely follow the University of Michigan's branding displayed through programs. Therefore, I have a personal connection to the topic and have always been intrigued by the origins of programs. Programs have helped me remember meaningful experiences at Michigan games with family and friends that will last a lifetime. Some programs are known for their artwork, others a milestone in a stadium or team's history. Some tell the story of bitter rivals battling it out on the gridiron, and some represent an infamous play that will be remembered forever. Some are rare because of weather conditions, and others because of limited distribution. Where did it all start? Why were programs first sold at University of Michigan athletic events? And how have recent movements toward digitalization impacted the distribution of physical programs at Michigan football games? The story begins at Hamilton Park in New Haven, Connecticut. The first program known to exist is from an 1872 contest between Yale and Columbia. However, the first Michigan football program is from an 1881 matchup, also at Hamilton Park, against Yale. This was the Wolverines' third season and fifth game ever. The earliest home program known to exist depicts a showdown between the Wolverines and Cornell in 1891 at the Detroit Athletic Club grounds. There was not very much advertising early on in programs. Most resemble a scorecard as a single, double-sided sheet of paper, but many did not originally even have a place to record statistics from the game. In the early 1900s, programs slowly began to evolve into beautiful art pieces. This golden age of programs, as described by many collectors, included artists producing covers and selling their designs to schools across the country. Check out this unique cover from Michigan at Stanford in 1949. Look at the extremely detailed breakdown of the cost of the program. This cork is one of many that makes programs so interesting to football fanatics. College football became king in the early 1900s, but track and field was very popular, and a lot of track programs were very colorful compared to the very early Michigan football programs. One early sign of the increase in demand for programs comes in 1897 when Michigan traveled to the Chicago Coliseum for a Thanksgiving matchup and the second indoor game in Michigan football history. The game was the fifth straight year of the teams concluding their seasons on Thanksgiving, and as a result of the magnitude of the game, the University of Chicago wrote this letter to Michigan Athletic Director Charles Baird and inquired about producing a joint program with input from both schools. it became evident programs were no longer just paper rosters. They featured art, logos, and information about the game. Michigan programs eventually transformed into athletic reviews, advertising the game as well as a review of the performance of all of the other sports on campus. Before the athletic review, though, a famous place known as Michigan Stadium opened in 1927. Before 1927, the Wolverines called Ferry Field home. When playing at Ferry Field, there was a great deal of variation in the sizing of programs. Games against Michigan State College and Indiana University in 1925 mirrored a pamphlet, while battles against the Navy Midshipmen and Minnesota Golden Gophers the same season resemble larger, modern-day programs. At the time, a game against Michigan State did not hold nearly as much significance as it does today. Thus, the program was smaller than one from the game against Navy. On November 6, 1926, Michigan played its final game at Ferry Field. While the program does not mention the game being the Wolverines' last at Ferry Field, it is abundantly clear of the impending move to Michigan Stadium. Famous advertisements to purchase a stadium bond, as well as advertisements for architectural companies, are prominently displayed inside of the program. Fast forward to the fall of 1927, the gates of Michigan Stadium opened to fans. The first game was against Ohio Wesleyan, but many recall the formal opening of the stadium to be the clash against Ohio State. The game against Ohio State was deemed to be the official dedication game, and the Wolverines invited the Buckeyes after traveling to Columbus to dedicate the Horseshoe, Ohio Stadium, in 1922. The dedication game program is over 100 pages, which was very rare at the time, and many fans kept the program because of the significance of the game and unique information inside. Interestingly, the program features letters from the governor of Ohio and president of Ohio State University congratulating the University of Michigan on the opening of Michigan Stadium. In the program, Fielding Yost writes, "I can think of nothing that expresses Michigan's regard for Ohio State University more tangibly than today's game, marking as it does the formal opening of our new stadium. When a man is married, he inevitably invites his best friend to be best man. When he accomplishes something exceptionally worthwhile, it is his closest friend who is first with congratulations." And so it followed that, when we plan the formal opening of the new stadium, we should single out Ohio to meet us on the gridiron. It was Yost's vision that guided the development of Michigan Stadium. Yost promoted bonds to finance the stadium, and some advertisements even acknowledged the dedication game, marking the day Yost's vision became a reality. This program cover was closely reproduced in 2015 for the Michigan-Ohio State game in the 150th anniversary of Michigan athletics. Similarly, Michigan dedicated Memorial Stadium in Champaign, Illinois, in 1924.
So some programs were so iconic and famous. For example, the dedication of the 1924 Memorial Stadium in Champaign, Illinois. And that was a game that Red Grange ran wild. It's considered a very historic game. That they turned out, those programs are not rare because it was such a famous game. People would keep them in their scrapbooks, and years later they come out onto the market. But this year, 2024, compared to 100 years ago, they reproduced that exact same program in a much smaller format, but using the exact same coverage because they knew they had a good thing going because it was a very historical thing.
In the 1940s and 1950s, Michigan programs could have the exact same cover with different colors depending on the opponent. Sometimes budgeting reasons, and other times a lack of creativity led to these designs. In many early programs from the Golden Age, from 1900 through the 1930s, many away teams were prominently featured in Michigan programs. In the early to mid-1960s, programs featured a section called This I Remember. Stories could include President Gerald Ford discussing playing in the 1930s, or Willie Heston talking about the 1902 Rose Bowl. Heston, of course, is known for his record 72 career touchdowns and 170 rushing yards in the first ever Rose Bowl. This section helped preserve history and refreshed fans' minds about the historical significance of the Michigan football program. Therefore, the University of Michigan Athletic Department was freely advertising itself and its teams in a product that was purchased by fans and increased revenue. It was certainly a win for the athletic department. Then, insert Dave DeVarty and company. Mr. DeVarty and his brother handed out free rosters outside of Michigan Stadium to initially advocate for local ballot proposals. When popularity for the roster skyrocketed, they began producing the Michigan Football Guide with ads, rosters, and a punt counterpunt opinion section, which was a play on Point Counterpoint from Saturday Night Live. Athletic Director Don Canham was livid with the operation, pushing staffers and police to attempt to escort DeVarty's distributors away from the stadium. Many fans would take the guides for the rosters and not purchase programs. DeVarty told athletic staffers if they wanted to sell a higher-end program for a cost, it needed to include more pertinent information and articles. Therefore, Mr. DeVarty and company played a role in the evolution of programs sold inside Michigan Stadium that is not often acknowledged. In the 1970s, 80s, and into the early 2000s, the Michigan Football Guide competed with programs sold by the university and annoyed athletic director Don Canham. Canham was known for his efforts to increase the branding and reputation of the University of Michigan. He put the block M on every salable good imaginable, and therefore this competition between the university and fans undermining potential profit angered him. Now, fast forward to the 1970s and 1980s. Program covers became exclusively focused on the home team and featured slick action shots and collages of photographs. Then, in the early 90s, for a couple years, there were posters inside of the programs. About 24 inches by 18 inches in size, they could be removed and displayed separate from the program. The posters included Michigan bowl games and star players from key positions. Then, fast forward all the way to 2020, for the first time at Michigan Stadium, no programs were made or distributed. Digital programs were published online, and the traditional wooden program stands were transformed into hand sanitizer stations. Some schools are still selling programs today, including Penn State. However, they have moved to a large, fold-over program that is similar to the simplicity of the first programs produced in the late 1800s. Penn State's new style for a program resembles some NFL teams, including the Detroit Lions. Programs have taken a very similar trajectory to tickets. Very boring to very colorful to digital. How do programs parallel history? The answer is found mostly in the artwork, including Charles Lindbergh making the first solo transatlantic airplane flight, World War I and World War II. Wartime programs, especially around 1943, are hard to find because of paper drives. Barrels were placed in front of the stadium to recycle programs in order to save paper in the war effort. Additionally, the 1925 Michigan vs. Ohio State program is beautiful because of its use of colors and depiction of the Ferry Field gates. But what makes it so special from a historical standpoint? The automobile featuring the Ohio State Block O. Most fans traveled by train to the games as the only means for transportation. But the automobile on the cover signifies the changing of times and 20th century innovation. Programs don't just parallel history, they also help document history. After the September 11th terrorist attacks, Michigan's scheduled matchup against Western Michigan was postponed from September 15th to September 22nd, 2001. The programs were already made before the season, however, the university recalled every copy.
So they took every single program and they brought them back to the printer and they put a wrap over it, meaning another program cover, which showed a candlelight vigil down on the Michigan football campus in regards to the memory of those that were lost on September 11th. So the program in and of itself, the game was delayed for a week, just like in 1963 when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. The game that Michigan was supposed to play in that weekend was delayed for one more week until for us to play Ohio State.
The value of programs is dependent on supply and demand, just like any other commodity. Collectors pay a lot more for rare, older programs that are not as widely circulated. Rivalry games, including Michigan-Ohio State, are of higher value and include 2 dedication games in the series. War year programs are also of higher value because people recycled many of them in an attempt to save paper. What recently decreased the value of programs but helped collectors? eBay.
Now, one of the things that basically kind of harmed the value but helped the collection base, and that is eBay. Once eBay started, certain programs dropped in value because people saw that they could list them and sell them and make a lot of money, and more leaked out in the hobby. But then there are always those go-to programs that will always be rare. The Camp Grant program I discussed, the 1902 Rose Bowl program, extremely rare and extremely sought after, and the most valuable football program there is on the face of the planet, of all sports programs when it comes to college football.
What are some of the rarest and most interesting Michigan football programs of all time? In 1943, Michigan played at Camp Grant, and there are only 3 programs known to exist. The program was a mimeographed piece of paper folded in half, which saved paper because of the war effort, but led to a bland program design that many people did not keep. In 1940, Michigan played at Columbia. The program appears to feature famous actress Marilyn Monroe. What's the only problem? Monroe had never been in a movie and did not break out as a star until the late 1940s into the early 1950s. In 1998, Michigan traveled to Hawaii for the second time ever. I will let Ken McGee, who traveled to the game, explain the rarity of the program.
I knew about this ahead of time because a Notre Dame guy had told me about it, another collector. The program for the 1998 Hawaii game came out on Wednesday, and it was inserted into the local newspaper. So it's basically a newspaper magazine that looks like a program. I found out that this paper is distributed throughout the entire series of islands in Hawaii. So hundreds of thousands of this program were created. However, very few people knew about it, so nobody saved it. Fast forward a few days later to the football game. There are little kids around the stadium in Hawaii, and they're saying, buy your newspaper, buy your newspaper. So the Saturday newspaper also had a smaller print run, but they had programs for it at the game. And so, but people are going to the game, they don't want to buy a newspaper. So these kids weren't saying program for sale, program for sale. And then what happens is nobody bought the program. Hundreds of thousands of that newspaper are printed. Very few survived. And I'll tell you what.
Finally, in 2011, Michigan hosted Notre Dame for the first night game at Michigan Stadium. The game is remembered for Denard Robinson's last-second touchdown pass to Roy Roundtree, but something unique is embedded in the program. Audio from Desmond Howard's famous 1991 touchdown catch against Notre Dame plays for fans who opened the program, a nod to the history of the rivalry. By documenting world history, Michigan football history, and showcasing the evolution of our beloved sport, programs have evolved into more than just a piece of paper or a roster. They are unique pieces of memorabilia that help collectors share passion with each other and help young fans remember the thrill of big moments. The design of programs in many ways is returning to its original form. As mentioned earlier, teams like Penn State have moved toward a larger scorecard style, which resembles the first programs from the late 1800s, except these feature color and logos. The future of physical programs is uncertain, and as digitalization persists, Michigan football collectors and fans are worried physical programs have been lost forever.
In a handful of years from now, we've got the Bentley Historical Library, and they're going to showcase that. Or you could go to the museum that shows all the dinosaur bones, because that's what they're becoming. They're becoming an extinct species.
Regardless of the future of physical programs, the history of this cherished item will tell the story of Michigan football for years to come. Historic matchups, moments, and occasions are displayed on program covers and in the carefully crafted pages. Nothing can ever change that. Programs from the years of Yost, Schembechler, and Harbaugh will forever tell the story of the roar of the crowd that still echoes inside Michigan Stadium, from game-winning touchdowns, defeating Ohio State, and claiming Big Ten championships. Today and forever, go blue.